G'day, and welcome back to Pushing 50. My name's Ben. Today we're going to be talking about the infamous Pajero incident, which a few of you have asked about. So I was made fun of by one of my long-term friends, Luke, for having to do a little bit of research. The only reason I did that is so I can give you an accurate account of when and what happened. So we'll start on the 26th of July 1989, just to make us feel really old. And that's the day that I got my learner's permit at Bondi Junction RTA, Roads and Traffic Authority. So I got that and learnt how to drive in a Mitsubishi Pajero. Some months, or around 6 months later, my parents went skiing in Canada to Blackcomb and Whistler. Left my grandfather, Olpa, because we're Dutch, to look after me as I was still going to school at that stage. Decided to sneak out very late on a Friday night, Friday the 23rd of March 1990. And drove around in the Pajero. I picked up a couple of friends, Palacis and Matt. I won't do last names out of respect for you. We were on our way to pick up another guy, Felix, one of Matt's friends, and we thought we'd drive around for a little while and see what we could do in the Pajero, see if we could smoke a tyre, do those hoon sort of things. In the wee hours of Saturday morning, we approached a right-hand corner up a fairly steep gradient, which I thought would be a good setup to be able to get the inside tyre to lose traction and maybe make a little bit of smoke. So went up this corner, turned extremely sharp, only doing about 25 kilometres an hour. A Mitsubishi Pajero has a very high centre of gravity. I didn't really think too much about it. So the Pajero lurched. It didn't break traction at all. It lurched to the left and grabbed, and that sent us into a roll onto the top left-hand corner of the car. It hit quite violently and came to rest upside down. So we didn't actually do a full roll, it was only half a roll. So at that stage, we're now sitting in the car upside down, so the sky's underneath the bonnet and I'm looking at the road, and I don't know how long for, but I was taking a little bit of time for the brain to catch up with what had just happened. And at that time, at that moment, I dropped through, the sunroof was open, I dropped through and onto the road. Palacis had undone my seatbelt so I could get out of the car, and I just dropped onto my head. Look, in hindsight, quite funny. I was then climbing out the window, and because the car's upside down, the engine was actually still running. But because the car or the engine was upside down, all the oil was coming down and going through the exhaust valves, and the oil was literally burning off into this huge white plume of smoke, which was drifting up through a block of flats that we rolled the car in front of. So I decided I've got to stop the engine, so I've turned the key off. That didn't stop the engine. For some strange reason, I don't know. Some of the maybe Brendan McLean can shed some light on why the engine didn't stop at that stage. It was still in gear, so I remember sitting on the roof of the car inside the driver's side and reaching up and putting my hand on the brake pedal to stall the engine, which worked. Slowly, the smoke that had drifted up through the block of flats dissipated, which wasn't a good thing, but at least we're dealing with the situation. And so I climbed out the window, and I've looked around. Palacis is standing there, and I look over my shoulder and see Matt running up the road with a bit of a limp, and I thought, oh God, what's going on there? And he sort of collapsed and sat down and lay on the grass. Matt, unfortunately, I don't think he was wearing a seatbelt, and he got thrown and hurt or bruised his back quite badly. People at this stage had started coming down. There's a little bit of glass on the road from one of the smashed windows. People had come down out of their flats, one of them carrying a broom. They checked that we were all okay, and of course the police were called. I'm not going to run away from the vehicle, it's my dad's car. So, still in shock pretty much at that stage. This is just outside Nick Gardner's house too, or very close to his house. So news got around school pretty quickly on Monday. But we're sitting there, the police arrive, they survey the situation. I cannot even tell you who organised the tow truck. I think it was the police, to come and roll the car back onto its wheels and put it onto a flatbed and take it back to North Bondi where I was living. During that time I had to face up to the situation, so still in shock, but the gravity of what had just happened was certainly starting to weigh on me, and realising that I had to call my grandfather and own up to what I've just done. Making that phone call, one of the hardest ones in my life at that stage. I remember distinctly ringing Olpa. He answered the phone after waking up. By this stage it's probably close to 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, Olpa, it's Ben. And he said, Ben, but you're upstairs in bed. And then I had to come clean and fess up. He got out of bed and jumped in his car. I told him where we were, and he arrived on scene to see Palacios and Matt and myself, the police with the tow truck, getting the car back onto its wheels, and he dealt with the situation. The police had asked me during that time, whilst we were waiting for Olpa to arrive, if I had a driver's licence. And I said, well, I don't have a full licence. And they said, well, do you have any licence? I said, well, I've only got a learner's permit. So obviously I had done something extremely wrong. They didn't fine me for reckless driving. They did fine me for not driving to the conditions of my licence, which means that I had to have a licensed driver next to me. Didn't have that, so that fine was $45 back in 1990. So Olpa's arrived, the car's been cleaned up and put onto a flatbed truck. At that stage it was time to jump in the car with Olpa. Matt was in pain and had an injury. I can't remember if it was a bruised kidney or a bruised liver. He might chime in the comments, but the decision was made to take Matt to hospital so he could get the appropriate attention and care. So we dropped Palacios off, and Matt and I are in the car. Olpa's turned around and said, I don't know about you, but this is quite upsetting. Here, have this, and gave me a pill. Do what Olpa says because I'm in big trouble. So I take the pill, and it was a Serapax to try and calm me down. I'm not sure if he gave one to Matt as well, but off we drove to the hospital. Matt and I are looking at each other. On the way, Olpa had driven straight through a stop sign or a red light just as we were getting to the hospital, and Matt and I looked at each other and sort of went, oh geez, we've certainly upset him. So Matt's parents were called. I think it was his father that came to the hospital, and we drove home after that and left Matt at hospital with his dad, or mum. I can't remember which one. Sorry, Matt. So we arrived home, we went to bed and woke up the next morning. The Pajero had been delivered to outside our house with a blue tarp over the roof. My parents were called in Canada, and the decision was made that they weren't going to shorten their ski trip. The damage was done. I was certainly in a lot of trouble. So once their ski trip was done, they came home, relieved Olper of his duties, which I didn't put a foot wrong with him after that. It was still quite a traumatic experience for my grandfather, and for that I'm truly sorry. And Matt, I'm sorry that you were hurt in that incident. Obviously, after 6 months of driving, I wasn't as skillful as I thought I was. We were all bulletproof in those days. My mum and dad arrived back from Canada, and the car made several phone calls to the insurance company. The only way for insurance to cover it was for Dad to report the car as stolen and have me charged. Thankfully, my father didn't go down that route. So the Pajero, because we've only done half a roll and we've landed on the left top edge of the roof, it had actually pushed the whole car, so it was bent. The panel beaters looked at the car and said, well, if this is under insurance, it'll be a write-off. And Dad said, no, it's not under insurance. The quote for fixing the car was $12,000, which Dad had money set aside in a bathroom restoration account for the Bondi house, the North Bondi house, and used pretty much all of the money out of that account to fix the car. Needless to say, I was in deep shit. I had to sell a bunch of bits and pieces to try and help that Dad had bought me over the years, and life slowly returned back to normal, very slowly. I was still able to learn how to drive, etc., but that was the Pajero, and that's how the accident happened. Any other questions about that, feel free to ask me, and we'll go through it. But Palassus, I'm sorry about that night. Matt, I'm sorry about that night. Probably one of the stupidest things I've done in a motor vehicle. On the next episode, we're going to go through another accident I've had, and probably another one of the stupidest things I've done. This was on 2 wheels on an electric scooter. We'll go through that on the next episode of Pushing 50. So thanks for listening, and don't do what I do. Cheers.